Good morning and welcome. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order at 10:02. Oath of office, Brent.
You raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Tim Fuller,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance
I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United
to
States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California.
and the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely
That I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge
That I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roll call.
Commission members Brown,
Present.
Fuller,
Present.
Gapel, Greer,
Present.
Harris,
Present.
Vice Chairman Smith,
Here.
Chairman Vieira.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Greer, would you mind leading us in the flag salute this morning? Please stand.
Please repeat after me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And if you could please remain standing, we have Elder Richard Davis, who will be leading us with an invocation.
Let's bow our heads. Dear Jesus, we come to you with true and humble hearts, thanking you for your many blessings, dear Lord. We ask that you continue to bless this commission with wisdom and knowledge to handle all situations that come across their desk. We ask that you allow them to be excellent stewards over the funds that they administrate. We ask that we be leaders for the other cities with the programs and decisions that we make today. Dear Lord, lead us and guide us in all things. Amen.
Thank you. We have a few presentations this morning, so if I could ask Mr. Marvin Christ, Mr. Chris Johnson, if you could. I would just like to take a moment to thank these gentlemen and Mr. Rob Parris, who's going to be sitting in for Mr. Augusta, for serving on the Criminal Justice Commission over the last 2 years. Not only have they added to the city, but I believe to the valley as a whole with the reduction of crime. And I know that you're moving on to other things, but I believe your impact will still remain with the city of Lancaster here. So on behalf of the commission, I'd like to thank you for your time and your commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marvin. Here's a plaque for you.
Thank you.
Chris, thank you so much. If you could just pass this on to Greg. Public business from the floor, agendized items. We have anything this morning, Brett, on the agendized? No? Okay. Consent calendar. Members, did you get a chance to take a look at the minutes of the 10th of March and 12th of May? And if so, are there any questions, concerns, issues? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve, do we need two separate motions, by the way, or just one for both sets?
One action is fine.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the minutes of March 10th, 2010, and to approve the minutes of May 12th, 2010.
Second that motion.
Okay, and I think everybody sees the voting box there in front of you, so if we can go ahead and take that vote. Thank you. Continued business, CB1, discussion, determination of the Criminal Justice Commission goals. I know this has been on the agenda the last couple of times. We've had some transitioning. I believe all of you have received a copy of that, and I think, Mr. Cottle, you've also reviewed that. If you could maybe take a moment just to get some highlights on that for us.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. We have a commission goals, and last year the commission approved a set of goals, and we thought it would be appropriate, and that commission thought it would be appropriate as well, that we bring those commission goals forward with changes and modifications to this board, not only to get their input, but also get certification and direction as it relates to the new sitting commission that we have here. The goals, and I'll go over them briefly. You've had a chance to read them. The Commission mission is the Criminal Justice Commission will use its control, influence, and to advocate, educate, and advise the City Council, City staff, community stakeholders on policy, procedures, and programs that influence the nature, amount, and severity of Part 1 crimes in the City of Lancaster. That's generally the mission. And I think there's three key active components in there. One is going to be to advocate, educate, and advise. And those are the three, from a citizen commission standpoint, the three main focuses that this commission can do and can impact. It's also noted that the commission goals would be that we lower the Part 1 crimes to below 300 Part 1 crimes. The previous was lowering the number of Part 1 crimes per 100,000 people to 300. We've really closely accomplished that goal within, I think it's about 30. I think we're about 330 per 100,000 at this point.
We're actually at 312, I think, from last year.
Oh, see, Mark's got that right off the top of his head. So 312. So we're very close to achieving that goal. In the 1 year the commission's been established, the previous commission said, well, let's take that to a new level and let's get below 300. There was a little bit of debate about how realistic that was to get below 300, but I think there was some debate about how realistic it was to get to 300 last year, which was accomplished. We've modified the previous goals to include this as getting Part 1 crimes to below 300 per 10,000 residents in this commission's goals, or in this commission's year's goals. We've also added to that a more active component of the goals, which would be, and before the first year's commission, we kind of looked at it as let's take a lot of learning and let's learn from this experience. Let's do what we can do, and we've added a kind of an activity that would be more active for the commission to participate in. And one problem we've had is that there's a certain number of businesses that have a significant number of Part 1 crimes caused to them. Is working with identifying those top 10 businesses, working specifically with them as a commission of advocates, as a commission of experts, to say how can we help you not be criminalized, or not be taken, or not be vandalized, or not be stolen from. And having that deterrent in some of those businesses would then have a further lessening impact on the Part 1 crimes. So kind of taking an active role, identifying where the problem areas are and fixing them, specifically with one-on-one meetings with the Sheriff's Department, citizens such as yourselves, stakeholders, leaders, and say, we're here to help you. How do you, is it video cameras, is it patrols, is it security, is it what will cause the people to deter from stealing from you or causing problems in your business, for example. And we've added that as an activity of the commission as well. So those are some of the highlights and discussions. We've talked internally as well, and I think we've talked with Chairman Vieira, that one other component, and it's probably a more specific component, is telling the story of the relative and true crime in our community. The FBI stats are out, or some preliminary stats are out as it relates to 2009 crime numbers. And comparatively to other communities, we're not bad. And that story needs to be told. And I think that the most appropriate people to tell that story is this commission, as peers, as leaders in the community, to tell that true story. I think sometimes people here read the paper, read the news, and they have a different outlook, taking those real stats and comparing them to other communities that we think are safe or that we have an image of safety. And when you see those numbers, you're kind of awakened to the fact that, we are a much safer community than a lot of people portray, including ourselves sometimes we portray. So I think it's going to be a mission of this commission as well over this next year to tell that story appropriately. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Or Mark might want to add to those comments as well.
The only comment I would add is that, at the end of this, I have a update for you on some of the budget goals that we have as well, too, which do tie into what we just talked about, and they deal with community policing and a few other things that we're going to do in the budget, including safety for downtown. So I think they really tie in.
I have a quick question. Just for reference, what did we start out with last year? We ended at 312?
The crime rate went down 18% last year, 32% for 2 years. I think it was, doing this by memory, 360-something. In 2007, the crime rate was 454, and it's gone from 454 in 07 to 312 in 09. In 08, I'm not sure what it was, but it's over 2 years, it was 32%. But it was about an 18% drop.
And do you know, are we beating that this year already, or are we?
We're about 5%. The first quarter stats were released. We were about a 5 to 6% reduction this year. Obviously, it gets harder. A couple of the areas that we were down in 6 of 8 crime categories. In fact, in violent crime, we were down almost 30%. What was hurting us was larceny theft. And that's specifically where we would hope the commission can do it, because that's one that's achievable. If we have 10 businesses, and we and the Sheriff's Department easily can identify those. We've identified them. If we have 10 businesses causing that, if we affect those 10 businesses, we reduce that crime. The problem with crime stats is while larceny theft may not be the most serious, it's numerically the biggest. It's almost half of the total crimes. If we affect that, we affect the crime rate. The Sheriff's Department is doing a great job on the serious crimes, the violent crimes that people are victims. The Berg team is doing outstanding. Grand theft auto, we've beaten down to a point where it's probably maintenance level. Larceny theft is where we need the help.
What I might suggest is that maybe the commission could come up with a subcommittee, if you will, of 2 or 3 that may have an interest in that area, that could work with the city, public safety, or the Sheriff's Department, or both for that matter, to maybe assist with these businesses that could use some additional support or education along how we could potentially reduce further the Part 1 crimes. So I guess what I'd ask the commission, if there are, I'd be willing to be a part of that. If there's other commission members who would like to do that, if you want to think about it or let me know. I think in tandem we can again work with the city to do that, if that might be appropriate. Yeah, Mr. Brazigian?
Just real quick, too, I think part of that's going to be that there are some businesses that really probably aren't taking, I don't want to portray all these businesses as just being victimized. There's some that really need to take more seriously their responsibility as a business, because some of them will just use the Sheriff's Department as, it's another shoplift, let's call them. So part of it's really going to be explaining how important it is to the community and getting them to step up. I don't know if that helps you or not. But
I think so. I think what I envision would be we would be the conduit for the community itself, stating these are the issues that we are seeing, and this is the evidence of that. And as a result, here's what we can believe, things that you can do. And if not, we'll have to have that next conversation. So, is that?
Yes, I don't have a mic here today, but I had one question. I just want to. I don't know if I can throw it that far. Sure. Thank you. Okay. The one question I have is I just want to be clear on this. When we talk about these 10 businesses, it's not necessarily 10 industries or 10 types of business. There are specifically some large retailers and other businesses in the area that not only are not proactive, it appears, in apprehending shoplifters or wanting to have any kind of encounter with them. In essence, the unwritten policy is that they know and understand that people come in and shoplift in their store, and they don't want to have any type of confrontation or any kind of apprehension. They, in essence, just want to let it happen because they don't want any kind of conflict. Is that right?
Mr. Greer's hit the nail on the head. The issue being in their loss prevention mode, some businesses are very aggressive in a loss prevention mode and policing the adjacent property to their business, and some do nothing. And they do nothing as a matter of policy. So it is upon us to bring the importance of the fact that they need to be engaged and proactive in those efforts to diminish crime at their business. And it's become some policies of liability issues or with the prosecution base, and just to rely on the Sheriff's Department to manage that. But on the other side that Mr. Greer brought out is the fact that the criminal element knows these businesses because it's commonplace and within the network of their information to each other, and they frequent them because of the lack of proactive responsibility by that business to manage their loss prevention.
Do you feel that it's intimidation, or do you think they don't have the resources that are necessary?
I believe that they, based on maybe being sued or they're concerned about vicarious liability as it relates to taking that responsibility for a detention or arrest of an individual for committing a crime on their property, that they'd rather leave that to the government entity to manage that, and they don't want to take on that liability. At the same time, they do have a responsibility to the community not to proliferate that criminal base in their business, because it draws more people that desire to be involved in that kind of activity to their business and our community.
And which is an absolute impact on that surrounding area there as well.
Correct, and as well as a resource drain.
And have those top 10 been identified? I'm not sure if I understand that yet. Have they actually been identified at this point?
Yes, we know statistically the top 10 as it
Okay.
relates to calls for service and file numbers that have actively been pulled by the Sheriff's Department. We know who they are, and we want to work with them in partnership. It's not a point the finger at you. It's, hey, let's work collectively together in this community-based model to come up with a plan on how to resolve these issues at your business.
Great, thank you.
And also, it seems like, while I understand you say the idea is not to point the finger at them, initially I would assume the idea is to try and work with them on a collective effort to change their policy and change their ways. But in the event they're not willing to do that, I would hope that there is some way that we can, in fact, push them to do this. Because when you allow that kind of burglary, in essence, to go on in your business, certainly those people are not going to necessarily just stop with you because you're the only easy one. They may actually target other businesses that, in fact, do object to it and do want to stop. And the stories that I've heard have involved large retailers. I know that Commissioner Smith asked, maybe it's a business that doesn't have the resources. The ones that I've had described to me and I've heard about are certainly large retail outfits that I would be surprised that they could not afford some additional security.
And that is the case. The issue being, it's a gigantic resource drain. You know, if you start looking at in our contract relationship for law enforcement and how much money is calculated and resolving those issues at some of these larger businesses, we spend a significant amount of money from our public safety budget to deal with issues that relates to their business and purely because of a lack of attention on their part. So there is a course of action, as an example, like with our chronic nuisance ordinance that's been in place, that people can actually be fined for maintaining a public nuisance on their property that results in a significant calls for service and a drain of resources. They can actually be fined for that, and there's a progression within that. That is certainly something on the onset we don't want to take, but that is definitely leverage, okay, to a certain degree with these businesses, that if they're resulting in a high number of calls for service, that's resulting in a drain of resources here, and it's contributing to crime to the related businesses around them, then we need to aggressively deal with that issue.
How much of the it's a puzzling mentality. How much of it is actually driven by a fear of getting involved in litigation, and how much of it by trying to maintain the appearance of a calm and welcoming shopping environment? Any sense of that?
I have none of that, but that is probably another thing we should probably look into as it relates to that. And clearly, as we work with these businesses, we're going to determine what the specific issue is for whatever retailer we're dealing with. And we're going to have to maintain that dialogue with them. What would be their issues for not maintaining that? Not having those conversations at this point with them, I couldn't answer that directly as either way. But that will be something we can definitely talk about.
Is the fear of liability for, say, a false arrest, if they arrest somebody or detain somebody and then they get sued because the person, in fact, wasn't committing a crime? I assume that's what this liability is partly focused on. Is that an imagined or real liability risk?
Well, I don't believe it's only that liability, too, as well as the employee engaging someone, some type of altercation taking place. There's a ton of things that could be related into that liability aspect of that, just beyond just the arrest responsibility issues. Don, did you have?
Yeah, there was a specific incident that happened in the Inland Empire where there was a security guard that confronted a suspect and he was shot by the suspect. So at that point, that business decided that it would be better not to enforce petty theft laws at their building and just let them walk. So that's been the policy of that company since that incident. And I've discussed it with them a couple times, and it is their corporate policy that they are not going to get involved in that because they don't want to put their employees at risk.
Yet their crimes get reported.
Yes, but they do. They report the crimes after the fact. There were incidents where guys were walking out with great, big, huge piles of copper pipe, and they just let them walk, and then they reported it after the fact.
Raises our crime rate.
Yeah.
Other questions, comments in regards to the goals that have been presented? Again, Commissioners, if you could indicate your interest, I think what I would intend to do, work with Mr. Cottle on putting together a committee to work with Mr. Drico or whoever the appropriate individual would be to start speaking with these businesses in the city.
Do you want that indication now, or?
Well, I'd love if you, yeah.
Well, I would certainly be willing to be involved in any committee or subcommittee that had anything to do with that. That issue seems, I mean, while I certainly appreciate these retailers and their concerns, especially after the story that the lieutenant just shared with us, at the same time, I seriously doubt that retailer would stand there and do nothing if a customer took out a book of matches and started lighting product on fire in the store. And in essence, you end up having on some smaller scale the same effect on the community. When you allow people to come in and steal knowing that that's the case, you just encourage them to do it in the neighbor's business as well. Those specifically the kind of people in the reduction of Part 1 crimes that the Commission is supposed to be actively, trying to work with all the stakeholders in the community. And that should be the businesses as well. So.
Thank you, Dennis. And Mrs. Smith had also indicated that she had an interest. I would as well. So, and Tim Fuller as well. So the four of us.
For a Brown Act, you'd only need 3 as a subcommittee.
Oh, okay.
So you can have 3 folks, and you can report back to the group as a whole.
Okay.
But you should have 3 on a subcommittee.
And what that will be would be Dennis, Ms. Smith, and myself, and then we will report back. And we'll initially work with Mr. Cottle. Anything else relative to the goals that were presented? Okay. Hearing nothing, commission staff presentations, updates, reports.
Yeah, just one note, if there are any comments, and maybe you may want to approve the goals and authorize them to be your stated goals. And then we can modify them through the year as things may come up. We talked a little bit about the marketing of the level of safety as comparatively to other cities that is probably going to come up as a project, and that we can modify those goals at that time. But I think an approval of these goals, certifying them, and then directing the commission to report those goals to the city council, I think is going to be important so that they understand the work that you guys are going to be doing over the next coming year as well.
Okay, if we are comfortable with these goals, we could get a motion for such.
Do we need to come up with a number? We were at
for the Part 1 times?
I believe it just needs.
I think it's 300 is what,
We just want,
We set it at below 300 is the goal.
okay, no set number?
No set number.
Okay.
Now, let me clarify. One of the questions was asked too, is how is that relative to others? And that's when we started doing some of the research about the Part 1 crimes levels comparatively. There are cities that have, 25 or 250 per 10,000. Some that have 170 per 10,000. It is doable. As cities comparatively, I think that 250 is an achievable goal. I know Leo is kicking me under the chair right now, but nonetheless, it's we need to work towards that point. And if some of the projects you guys are working on have successes, and the projects I know that Axel's working on and Leo are working on are can bear some fruit, I hope we can get to that point.
okay.
But it's below 300 in either case, which is definitely doable, or should be doable.
Well, I would make a motion that we approve the goals as set out here this afternoon.
Call for the vote. You hear that? Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much. Reports. Number 1, a non-revocable parole presentation update. Lieutenant Doughton and Commissioner Goepel.
Commissioners, welcome new commissioners. Commissioner Goepel, chime in anytime, please.
Thank you.
Non-revocable parole, I'm sure everybody's aware of what that is now. The people are placed, when they leave state prison, they're placed on non-revocable parole, which means that they can't be violated and sent back to prison on a technical violation. But what they've done is they've allowed us to, law enforcement, to search. They give search and seizure so that we can contact them and search their residence, search their person, and if there's a new violation, then we can arrest them, send it through the courts, and attempt to send them back to prison through a regular case filing. So as of June 1st, 2010, we had 139 individuals that have either been released from prison on non-revocable parole, or that they were already currently on parole, and that their parole was converted from a supervised parole to a non-revocable parole. Of the numbers, of the 139, there was 11 in Lake LA, 3 in outlying county areas. There's 11 in Quartz Hill, and then the remainder in the city of Lancaster. And I've passed out a map that kind of shows you exactly where everybody is. 28 of the 139 are known active gang members that are throughout the county. So those non-revocable parole people, 28 of them are known active gang members. The previous list that we had from the non-revocable paroles, we had 25. So there's been an increase, quite an increase over the last month. And I think that was all in conversions for the most part.
Yeah, what had happened this past month is the Antelope Valley was actually screened for all their non-revocable paroles. So we are completely done right now. And like I said, we have 140 in Lancaster. We have 263 from the Antelope Valley. So all the outlying areas, and there's close to 100 in Palmdale. I give you a list of everything, of all the different cities and counties. We currently right now have 11,761 NRPs throughout the state, and we have 140 in Lancaster. The problem that what we don't know is, of these 11,000, where did they move to? Because even though it says 140 in Lancaster, that was their last residence. They could have went anywhere. So everybody from LA could have moved up here. We just don't know how many are actually up here.
If I could ask one quick question, because that's where I was leading. Is there a criteria set for those parolees as to where they can and can't reside, and if so, based upon what?
They're instructed to return to their county of commitment, but there is no conditions of parole that they have to. So we have no jurisdiction on them on parole anymore.
So basically, they can go wherever they want to go?
Yes, they can go out of state, out of county, anywhere they want.
And those that may come from out of state into this area here, law enforcement has no jurisdiction over them residing in the city of Lancaster or the Antelope Valley?
The jurisdiction they have is they're allowed to search without a search warrant. They're subject to search until they're off of parole, off of NRP parole, which is 13 months.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no specific jurisdiction as to where they have to go. You know, they're told to go, but I mean, as far as being supervised, you know, nobody's telling them they have to go anyplace because nobody's checking on them. When we go, and I'll tell you, we went to 25 last month, and of the 25, we were able to locate 15 of them. 6 of them we arrested. But the other ones, we don't know where they are. They're, you know, the address that they gave, they don't reside there. Some of the addresses that were on the spreadsheet that we get is Lancaster. Nothing more specific other than Lancaster. So it's going to be a difficult battle to try to manage this.
In fact, it's also, when they're arrested, I mean, is it in violation of parole or because it's non-revocable?
No, these were fresh charges. Most of them were narcotics-related charges, but there was one that was several firearms, and there was narcotics involved too. But and Commissioner Capel just talked about it. Non-revocable parole. 13 months. You don't commit a crime, they're going to remove you from parole. Now, a lot of them that we're already contacting, they're already off parole. When we contact them to do a compliance search or a visit, they show us the letter, hey, we're already off parole. I'm not subject to search. See ya. So we haven't looked, and I haven't personally looked and found out, well, was it the 13-month threshold, or are they doing it early? Are you aware of, are we letting them go early?
It'll show NRP active, and once they're NRP, if they're NRP active, they are on parole and they're subject to search. It'll show on your MDTs NRP discharged. It should say that if they're discharged, just like any other parolee would be discharged.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but I'm sure, were you there when they did a couple of them where they were active NRP, but they had a letter from corrections that said that they were removed from NRP status. They were no longer subject to search and seizure.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, there's been like 5 of them.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's the problem. Some of the obstacles that we're facing at the station level is when we go to a non-revocable parole location, the person's not there. We don't have any means of updating that into a system. We can't go into parole leads and update that and say, you know what, they're no longer at this location in Lancaster, thus taking them off the map, taking them off of the count that we have. So that's one of the obstacles that we're looking at that creates an issue. It's very time-consuming trying to track these guys down, especially when they're listed as Lancaster. But we do have the parole team that is actively involved in going out and, searching for them, and if they're in violation, we take them to jail. One of the very last non-revocable parole searches that we had, the parolee had a rifle, a handgun, and narcotics for sales. So we're dealing with not just a low level like we've talked about before. This isn't just a low level offender. Maybe the offense that he was paroled on was a low level narcotics offense, but he's got a lot of violence in his history, in his past. But because the last charge that he was sentenced on was a low-level crime, then he's eligible for non-revocable parole. Some of the things that our parole team's done, they're really active. For the month of May, they searched 98 parolees that were on active probation. That means that they are under supervised parole. We searched 21 non-revocable parolees. We contacted another 132 in the course of driving through the streets and making traffic stops, this, that, the other. We contacted 132 actives and 21 non-revocable paroles. We arrested 33 that were on active parole and 6 of the non-revocable paroles. Now, as a comparison, real quick, for Region 1, that's East LA, Lancaster, Palmdale, Altadena, Malibu Lost Hills, Temple, and Crescenta Valley, Santa Clarita. Last month, they searched 84 active parolees, and they didn't do any non-revocable paroles, and they arrested 19. So for Lancaster, with our team, I think we're right in there. And then if you look at the entire department for the month of May, they searched 485 active supervised parolees and 54 non-revocable paroles. And then they arrested 317 that were on active parole and 16 non-revocable paroles. So I think we in Lancaster are on the cutting edge, and we are really doing something about the issue. Any questions, comments?
On the lighter side here, or the better side actually, a couple months ago we talked about there was a potential, before everyone was screened, there was a potential of over 600 parolees being on NRP. Once they were screened, there's only 263 in the Antelope Valley, 140 in Lancaster, so that's the good news. The bad news is we still have over 2,000 parolees in the Antelope Valley that are deemed active and are serious and violent offenders. So we are still actively going after those also.
What's the release and designation process for non-revocable parole that allows 28 active gang members to be released? How does that happen?
Well, it's because their last conviction that they went to prison on was deemed a non-violent crime. Okay, it could have been narcotics, could have been theft. Okay, so the very last time that they went to prison, it was a non-violent crime.
So are the people that make these decisions and selecting these, are these fairly rigid criteria that release them, or is there discretion involved? Are people assessing these individuals and making discretionary decisions?
There's a complete task force that have already done this, and there's a task force in place right now in the prisons, because everybody on parole right now has been screened. They're screening them now as they're coming out of prison. So as far as the gang members, they had to be, for paroles, they had to be validated gang member while inside the prison. So they had to go through criteria inside the prison to be validated. And so these 28 were released, were not validated inside the prisons. So if they're a validated gang member, they're not NRP eligible. So he may be validated on the outside, but inside the prison he wasn't validated.
How does that happen? How is it that the sheriff's department identifies them as gang members, but the prison can't identify them as gang members?
There's different criteria what they do in the institution as far as how they assess who's a gang member and who's not. And it's much easier to assess them on the outside when they're around all their gang members, and inside they hide the fact that they're on parole and they won't admit to it and stuff like that. So there's a long criteria of things that the inside the institution has to do to validate a gang member.
Is there no communication between law enforcement and the prison system that they might be informed who the gang members are?
There's not much of that, because there's so many prisons up and down the whole state. Like I think we only get like 5% of our parolees that come from Lancaster. Most of them come from other parts of the state.
I take it that this program is a function of that the astonishing mismanagement of the state's budget has resulted in the fact that we can't afford to provide this prison services that the state's required. And so we're releasing people because we can't afford to take care of them. Is that correct?
I agree.
If, and I've been puzzled about this. I don't know if anybody knows the answer, but if a person is, I assume that there's some statutes that mandate what crimes are, what the punishments are, and judges have certain discretion to assess prison sentences. Has anyone looked at whether it's legal to release prisoners before their terms are up? Do you know whether that's even been challenged?
Well, I've heard discussions about it. There is a mandate that if a judge sentences somebody, that, you know, they've got the guidelines. They know exactly what they're sentencing them to. They know what the good time, work time, and what the reduction is. So they've got that right there as part of their sentencing. And when they sentence somebody, it's on the basis that they are going to be confined for a certain period of time. And there is law that dictates that that person's going to be defined for that period of time. Now, with that being said, you know, because of budgetary and this, that, the other, we see it in the county of Los Angeles, we see it in the state, that they reduce those sentences. Has anybody made an issue of it? No, not that I'm aware of, that anybody's brought up any type of legal challenge to the release of these people early.
I could tell you, take it beyond the step that too, even when someone is released on parole, if there's a period of time of supervision, I believe it's 13 months or whatever it's designated, beyond that 13 months, if they don't catch a new case within that 13th month, they go into an inactive status. Okay, so where they're not actively managed. They don't come off the parole list, but they're not actively managed at that point.
They just go to different status. They still have to check in and
Right.
give their address and stuff like that.
But they're not tested or visited or.
It depends. It depends on the commitment offense. But
Right,
there's three different levels of supervision.
So that conceivably, right, there's conditions of the parole, then how do you manage that from that point forward? It's basically on a reporting issue. So that's been an issue. The Truth in Sentencing Act was enacted for those specific reasons. But again, this is a Senate bill that's creating this non-revocable status. It's interesting that they call it parole. By definition, it's not parole at all, okay, because there's nothing. And so, but it was enacted by the legislature and passed, so it is a law that took place, so we're stuck with it. So we now are trying to work actively within that on how to manage the impact we're going to have. Mr. Cooley himself adamantly fought it. He believes that in L.A. County, to say anyone's a low-level offender that goes to state prison from Los Angeles County is ridiculous because the threshold is so high in our county to even recommend state prison on certain cases that if you go to state prison from L.A. County, then you shouldn't be qualified for this. And that has been his statement from the beginning.
Excuse me, Lieutenant, I had one question. One of the first set of numbers that you gave us, I want to say the parole team went out and looked for 25, was that 25 new non-revocable parolees? Is that
Yeah,
what
it was the last list that we had. It was 25 previous to this last list that we got for June. It was previous to June. So yeah, there was 25 that we went out and looked for.
And of that 25, you were only able to locate 15 at the addresses or places you believe they were going to be, correct?
That's correct.
And of finding 15, 16 ended up going to jail.
6.
Or excuse me, 6.
6 of them.
So almost 50, 45, 50% of
Right.
the people you did locate went back to jail.
Right. And then that was not on a parole violation, not a technical violation, but a new charge.
Could I suggest that we set up a plan? I've heard talk of it, but nobody's really implemented it like we do Cal Gangs. Can we do the FI people in the community, the NRPs in the community, and keep a database with those?
You know, I know we can FI them. I know there's been talk of the department coming up with a brand-new FI card that would actually do that. And then the crime analyst would have to somehow come up with a database. I've got the two Lancaster crime analysts over here. What do you guys think? Yep, I'm getting a thumbs up. So yeah, I think that we probably need to go forward, but there has been talk. I know that Mr. Tanaka was discussing the new FI card that would include parole information and try to, so we can build a better database on where these people are. Because obviously, do we contact them on a regular basis? Absolutely.
Right.
Other
Other
comments? Questions?
I had one quick question, Don. Are we doing anything to correlate where our crimes are occurring and parolees are living, and looking at if we have a high crime rate in the area where they're at, knocking on all those doors?
Well, as far as knocking on the doors, no. I mean, we know where these parolees are. We're doing regular parolee searches. I mean, we've got a full team that's doing it every day. And the crime analysts map the crime out, and we've got the maps of where the parolees are, where they're being released to. So yes, we're mixing all that information, and we're using that as a tool to go out and, okay, where are we going to go today? And that's definitely a big indicator, so yes.
And not only that, but by hitting all these police houses, we actually solve a lot of crimes, because then we'll find all the stuff at their house. So it wins both ways.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, California Highway Patrol update. Captain Hoos.
I'm Todd Hoos with the Highway Patrol. To give you a general idea of the Antelope Valley CHP area, it is geographically it's a little different than you're probably accustomed to. Normally you have city lines or county lines. Well, with the Highway Patrol, with 110 or 120 CHP offices, our geographic area is around 1,400 square miles. We're primarily northeastern portion of Los Angeles County, mostly rural, high desert, two-lane roads. We have around 1,400 square miles, 3,200 county road miles, and with that, we're normally patrolling it with around 8 officers. So if you happen to run into us one of those times, you are fortunate. There's not quite enough of us. Now, some of you have seen Highway Patrol behind you, but I'm certain you weren't speeding. There's around 23 heavily traveled county canyon roads in and out of here into San Bernardino, up into the LA County mountains and everything else, and we travel those. We're responsible for those. On the 14, we have around 30 linear miles, and in those 30 miles, we see around 93,000 vehicles per day. We're bordered by Kern County on the north. The east side, we're at, this is just our CHP area. San Bernardino County on the west, or on the east. On the west, Lake Hughes and Green Valley, and on the south by SR2. Our CHP office here in town has one captain, that's me, one lieutenant who you have seen, Lieutenant Paul Schaefer. I have 4 sergeants. I have around 43 officers, 5 non-uniformed staff who do the standard responsibilities plus taking care of the cars. And we're fortunate enough to have 26 senior volunteers who dedicate all of their time, tremendous numbers of hours of time, to us for free, which is nice. They run our front office. They help me with cars. You see them at bike races. You see them everywhere. They're a wonderful resource. In general, we investigate around 1,300 collisions per year. Of those 1,300 collisions, normally around 25, sometimes 28 of them are fatal collisions. They take a little bit longer, and you see that, but that's through our jurisdiction. There's around 1,000 drunk drivers arrested by the Highway Patrol each year. Of the fatal collisions I didn't mention, they're throughout our 1,400 square miles. And the only commonality that I have noticed or that we see consistently is seatbelt use. And so while we're spending a great deal of time issuing seatbelt citations, you may have noticed also that seatbelt fines have gone up statewide. Not enough, but they've gone up a little bit. You'll find that, in my experience in the 23 years I've been working the job and of 100, maybe more people that I've seen in fatal collisions. Not once have I cut a seatbelt off in a collision. So I'm pretty adamant about seatbelts. We're spending our time with enforcement, also in education. We conducted last year, and this is where I was listening to the Lieutenant speak about the parole team. Highway Patrol, just in Antelope Valley, we had 36,000 enforcement contacts last year. That's just with my 50 sworn officers. Well, with 36,000 and the possibility of an FI card, we also have an opportunity to run into some of the parolees and track them and gather the information. And so I'm going to ask them to spend some time over with us, just training my officers and moving them into the same fold where we're gathering the same information, because our relationship with the Sheriff's Department is tremendous. And so anytime we can overlap our tools, we're going to work on them. We enjoy a group of young, motivated officers up here in the Antelope Valley. Majority of my officers live here in the community, and so they're stakeholders. So they enjoy all the progress and all the success of law enforcement and our judicial system here, as well as having a nice, productive position. Some of the new tools that we have, certainly we worked with CalGrip, but one thing that's coming in this next month or two, and I'm going to spend some time speaking to our Sheriff's Department about it, is I'm currently installing video cameras in all of my patrol cars. And with these video cameras, anytime my officer turns the emergency lights on, it automatically records. It has audio and video. It'll also capture, in the event of a collision, one of our collisions, which on occasion does occur, it'll back up the tape and pull the previous 60 seconds and then continue recording. Once the enforcement contact is made without the officer making any actions, just hitting the button, it'll continue recording throughout the incident. It's got outside and inside speakers. Now, that's one of those things that we're going to speak to our law enforcement partners on also, because we're all going to be on TV. And it's one of those things, when you have a video camera running, it is a tremendous advantage for our prosecution. It's an advantage for my officers and their individual liability as well as our department's liability. But it's one of those things that it improves the performance. If you've ever been in a position where you know you're on videotape, you know that there's a tape recorder running, you act that much better. Your performance is that much better. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to have us step up another level. And in sharing that with the Sheriff's Department and with anyone we run into, if you see those red lights on, smile, wave, you're on one of our DVDs. It's one of those things that in our court systems also, the courts, I'm certain, are going to be requesting that through discovery when you have a case that comes before you in court. Certainly the credibility of my officer always plays a role, and our testimony of any law enforcement officer is significant. But in addition to that, to be able to bring a DVD forward, play the tape, and watch the entire incident, it's an absolute wonderful tool. Our Highway Patrol, in our relationship with throughout Santa Clarita Valley, the Antelope Valley, is excellent. And as I continue to work with parole and corrections and probation and law enforcement, they will continue to improve their performance. But I'm very happy to be here, and I'm so impressed with the teamwork that goes throughout Lancaster, Palmdale, and everywhere throughout Antelope Valley. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I do. 36,000
enforcement contacts
in 1 year?
Just last year.
Just last year?
We run around 25,000 to 27,000. Actually, they went up 1,000 last year, but around 25 to 27,000 of them are those good-looking pink citations, tickets.
Is there any way that we can get, I'm a parole agent, by the way, is there any way we can get any kind of training to your officers? Because I get calls from LA sheriffs all the time saying that they're running 4 deep and they got gang members in there. If you guys knew the conditions of parole, especially 36,000 of them, most of them are out of their area, most of them should have gone to jail. Is there any way we can get to work together and do some training so that the agent or your deputies can call us?
Absolutely.
Because they all need to go to jail.
Well, that opportunity to take someone to jail is one of those that our officers tend to welcome, because when you take one person to jail, you're not going to run into them for the next month or 2 months, and many times we take their cars also.
Right, but there's a whole slew of conditions of parole that I can educate them on so that what they can look for, like knives and stuff like that. So,
we would love to, and the opportunity to search is wonderful, and we're discussing that on the parole team. If my officers know about it, they run them and pull it up, they'll take the opportunity to search.
Right. I know a few of your officers, but if we can get all of them on board, we can do that.
We would love to.
Okay,
We
thank
have
you.
a train day every 2 months.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One quick question to know, of the 1,300 collisions that you spoke of, any idea of those, how many were teens that maybe weren't wearing seatbelts or fatalities or involved in those collisions? Were they mostly veteran drivers, younger drivers?
The majority of our drivers, which is actually very consistent with the majority of collisions of my officers normally crash in the first 2 years. It's normal. And the majority of ours is a disproportional number up to around 18 or 19 years old. Our newest drivers disproportionately crash significantly more, which is very common for us. Beyond that, it's pretty much all across the board, and it depends on where it is. As far as pulling out those kind of numbers, we track them. We have them by age, by location, by date. Different times of year, obviously, when school is in, we have different patterns. But given the Antelope Valley geographically, with 1,400 square miles, even our fatal collisions, we've gone through 7 years of experience very recently and tried to pin map it to identify any commonalities, anything that's going to tell us, okay, here's a focus location. And it's surprisingly uncommon, each collision. There's the middle of nowhere, there's no new intersection, and someone goes off the road and rolls their car. But we can pull that information if there's something specific you're looking
Well,
for.
where I was leading to is if it was disproportionately teens, maybe we could look at an education program within the local high schools of speaking with some of those students, with officers or whoever you deem appropriate.
If you have any schools that are interested in it, we are currently there's 3 primary programs. There is what's called Start Smart for our newest drivers. We have teen drivers, we have teen and parent organizations, and almost once a month at my office, we'll bring our new drivers and their parents and run them through some videos and some training and answer their questions, but it's available to you. Okay. And anytime you have any information, call our office or anyone that's interested in attending a class.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
As being on the receiving end of at the emergency room of the folks that don't wear their seatbelts, I appreciate your effort in that regard. I was also curious of the people that are ejected from the vehicle, which is usually most of the serious injuries and fatalities. How many of them are not driving? That is, are passengers in the front or back seat, or kids on the laps of parents?
We have, I don't know exact numbers, but the majority of drivers that are involved in collisions, the majority of them are running solo. But of those that have multiple people in the vehicle, more often than not, passengers are ejected. The drivers, for some reason, I mean, like maybe all of us when we were young, you thought you have to wear a seatbelt, but you never told everyone else in the car to do so. It's common for us to have passengers not wearing seatbelt, and it's extremely common in any rollover that the driver is catapulted out of the car, or the passenger that's unseatbelted is catapulted out of the car.
Thank you. I also am very happy about your cameras in the car. I think that's terrific. I mean, everybody's been in a situation where you've seen some screaming, annoying drunk in the field, and then they show up in court in their suit and tie and bewildered that anyone ever would arrest them.
I am too. I look forward to it. I mean, so many times we'll be investigating a complaint. Someone will call and complain about one of the officers, and the officer will come in, speak to my sergeant, and tell them, here's what they said, here's my notes, this is the kind of demeanor, but the person who walked in is, an honor roll student. They're wonderful. And then the officer will go, oh, well, that's all I have except for, here's a tape recording of the entire incident. And it's enlightening. It's encouraging. So I do look forward to this. And every day it's going to be a challenge logistically because we are the state, as was previously mentioned, and we're not always on the cutting edge of technology. And given that, each day, instead of a wireless download, we're going to be downloading a DVD and placing it into storage for each officer on each shift on each day. So there'll be a lot of DVDs in my office in case you want to come watch some.
Have you seen a downturn of collisions since the cell phone and texting laws have been in place? And How's that enforcement going? I know probably if it's a CHP or sheriff's car next to you, you're going to put your phone down, but I'm telling you, every other car I see, the people are on the phone still. So how's that going, and what's the impact been since that's been implemented?
Our collisions, our overall collision experience in the last since 2007, a little bit in 2006, it's consistently been decreasing. Our number of collisions, even though our population is going up and our traffic is going up, the number of collisions in the Antelope Valley that the Highway Patrol investigates has been coming down. And even from 2008 to 2009, we're down 7.9% in total number of collisions, which is encouraging. Our fatals are coming up just slightly, 2 or 3 each year, but any one fatality is significant. The texting laws, I see it just like you see it. I mean, every time you see someone who isn't staying in their lane or isn't paying attention or cuts you off, you know you're going to look up and see them on the telephone. And so I can't tell you that it's been overly effective. I can tell you that my officers do write a number of citations for texting. Texting is difficult, but also for talking on the telephone. And it's blatant. It's surprising. I mean, if you were going to go out and count the number of people talking on the phone versus the number of people not wearing a seatbelt, it's got to be 10 to 1 people talking on the cell phone. So while we're encouraging that, the distracted drivers are significant. Now, our number of distracted driver collisions, our percentages have gone down significantly, but that's mostly because when we interview someone, they're now not going to tell us, oh, I was distracted and I rear-ended that car because I was talking on the phone, now that it's illegal. Whereas before, people were more open to share with us in the interview after the collision. Some of my officers they're a little more motivated than others, and they'll actually ask to see the cell phone and ask them to look at it, and you'll go back through the past calls, and there you will see the cell phone call that occurred during the collision, or the texting that's only partially typed in. And very often in a collision, people forget to recover their telephone by the time we get there. And when we do, you'll see a text that's partially typed right in the middle of the collision. So what is the term? History is written by the survivors. It's what they tell us occurred, not necessarily what truly occurred. But what we can prove and what you see day to day is people are consistently using their telephones. And it's very dangerous. Distracted driving is incredible.
Okay, thank you, Captain Hughes.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Monthly crime stats. Jim and Lee?
I'd just like to do a little introduction on that, on some things we're doing here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I just wanted to bring forward some things we've come up with in the last couple months. Jim has got up and running a predictive model and historical database now that we've compiled for a significant amount of time that he's been putting together. And I just wanted to let you know that we have been meeting with the Sheriff's Department on how we're going to implement this information and utilize it out there in the field to fight crime. And what we've done is we actually met with Captain Anderson and his staff and sat in a room and started coming up with some different ideas and uses for utilizing this information. And what we've done is in this historical predictive models, we can actually go back historically throughout our community over a period of time of year, time of day almost, based on a set of data that's put in criteria, and have somewhat an idea of what we're going to be facing at a period of time. Also, along with the crime tracking and the migration of crime through the community, we can put forth our task force efforts and focus on specific crimes. Recently, one we've been discussing is the larceny issues, and the Sheriff's Department has implemented certain things that they've done through their deployment or actions of their teams to identify that issue and deal with it. But we also came up with some great ideas, as long as with the captain's staff, with deployment, allocation of units at times a day and throughout periods of the year. Where it pertains to shift designations and scheduling of deputies. So the number of deputies, area cars, where those area cars will be assigned as it relates to the community. The other thing is Jim has already put forward a presentation and a training model with the burglary team so far, and we're going to be systematically moving the different task force groups as we see uses for those teams, and to give them an opportunity to come up with some more ideas on how we can utilize this information that's out there. So this has been a good thing. How long was your presentation with the burglary guys? Several hours, wasn't it? 3 hours, and there was an interactive process with those deputies that work, and as you can see, they're quite successful already, our burglary team, as far as what we've done in the community for the past couple of years with the burglary reduction, and this is just something to progress on that issue. Okay, and then we met with the lieutenant of detectives at the station, who also gave us some input on maybe how the detectives at the station could come up with some ideas on how to utilize this information. And then it's something we can use here at the city in our public safety department as it relates to our our neighborhood watch programs, business watch programs, so we can get more eyes on issues as it relates to specific smaller communities within the city of Lancaster and issues that are being created out there. And then we're also sharing that information and coming up with ideas with our public works people and our parks, and that all those people, the more eyes we have out there in this community-based model, the better, as on specific issues. And we have been working in a plan for some period of time here at the city to involve all the employees here at the city in actively being a part of our public safety effort here. And so I just wanted Brett to introduce that with Jim's new program that you're not going to see here. We're going to be more into our normal issue, but we're going to be bringing things as a result of that to you in the near future. Okay?
It's great to hear the integration of all the data and information to really take that and use it to improve the community. The coordination's great.
We're really excited about it, some of the things, and it's creating a level of creativity among all of us, too, to just think of different ways we can use that and couple that with the information that already comes from the station that is done through their active criminal analysis, and put that together and see it work out there.
Hey, Lee, do we have any update on the Eye of the Sky program?
Right now, Mark could probably bring you closer up to speed on that.
Yes, the one technical issue that was remaining had to deal with the communications link between the airborne platform and the ground level controls, and there's no technical issue with it that's unsolvable. They just needed to test out the solution. Unfortunately, getting a plane at their test site has proven to be a challenge, but we expect the company to have it tested between June 16th and June 30th at their site, and assuming that it works the way they think it is, then we can go to the next step, which is demonstration in Lancaster. We do not have a date yet for demonstration because we obviously want the company to feel comfortable when they roll it out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Commissioners, we're going to move through about 5 areas real quickly. First area we'll hit on will be the PowerPoint presentation where we look at the totals. Then we'll look at our 52-week chart where we've looked back 52 weeks to see how we've been doing over the course of the last year. Then we'll hit the first map that's in your package up there, and then the second map. What I did with those 2 maps was I split out some of the information I was giving you before and actually put it into 2 maps, maybe so it's a little easier to understand. And then finally we'll hit on the monthly forecast. As we take a look at the last 5 weeks of data that we have since we last met in the commission, we see that our total Part 1 crimes kind of fluctuated just a little bit. You see week 22 up there looks a little low. Well, that's because week 20 or week 23 hasn't been factored yet, which would probably have some of the crimes reported relative to week 22. So probably the weeks that we need to look at up there more often up there are 18, 19, 20, and 21. Those probably have some fairly complete data in them. And you can see we hit 91 in week 18, dropped down to 76, back up to 91, and then down to 81. As far as our Part 1 or violent crime arrests go, you can see those across here, and there was quite a bit of fluctuation in there as well as our property crimes. And those are as compared to the total arrests for each reporting period. Again, this information is pulled from the booking slips at the station, provided by the station, which helps us a lot in trying to figure out how the arrests are going versus the crimes. And then we have the unique report numbers that were issued up there. You can take a look at those, and you can see in week 18, we were at 634, week 19, 609, then week 20 was probably the highest of the data capture period up there, followed by week 21, and then down to week 22. As we move on to the individual weeks and reporting districts, when we get to the active weeks, I'll show you, or the most active reporting districts, I'll show you how those lay out on a map as well. But with regard to these, we can see in week 18 we had a presence, a high in reporting district 1127, followed by that 1135 and 1137 again, and then rounded out by 1122 and 1133. The one that was good that's not in week 18 is 1121. That was pushed down a little bit, and I understand that's from a lot of effort both by the county enforcement or various county enforcement agencies. Week 19, we saw 1135, 1137 move into number one, along with 1127, 1123. And then we see a little bit of resurgence of 1121, but if you take a look at that quantitative number next to 1121, it's not too bad. It's 6 Part 1 offenses. So if we could get that fairly standardized, we'd probably be real happy with that. Week 20, 1127 is still up there. One of the things you're seeing with 1127 right now is that is the area where the Valley Central Way is, and we're seeing a lot of activity around Valley Central Way. And I'll show you 1127 in just a second. In week 21, where we still have 1127, 1137, and 1121 is still in there. And then finally, in week 22, which again I feel probably has a little bit of incomplete data yet, we're looking at 1137, 1135, followed by the grouping of 1123, 26, and 32. These are the most active reporting districts that we have, or that we, during this data capture period, the highest being 1127 with 49 Part 1 crime counts, followed by 1137, 1135, 1126, and 1192. Let's take a peek at those on the map here just for a second. Let's start with the lowest. This is 1192. Now, this is, the thing that's interesting about this is 1192 is kind of over by Quartz Hill, bounded by Avenue M on the south and Avenue K on the north, 20th on the west and 40th on the west. The thing that we're interested in with 1192 is it seems to be part of a little bit of a western migration we're seeing right now in our crime, and I'll point that out when we get to our maps just a little bit more, especially the spatial analysis maps. You'll be able to see where the trajectory is kind of moving south and west just a little bit. 1126 is this area right in the middle here, and I haven't spoken with anybody about any of the places that they were talking about that aren't probably doing much reporting of crimes that occur, but I would suspect maybe some of it is right around here in Avenue or 10th Street West and Avenue K. We see an awful lot of activity around this particular area right here. Followed the boundary for this reporting district runs up along Avenue J on the north, Avenue M on the south, and 20th Street West and 10th Street West. This entire area in here spikes up, and there's a lot of commercial activity in that area as well. You can see the larcenies that are occurring in places where the parking lots are in those areas. Again, that goes back to some of the auto larceny issues that we've been in discussions with the Sheriff's Department. Of course, this is 1135. We were just talking earlier, this completes the first year of my talking about 1135, 1137, 1121. 1135 is still up there, and you can see up there what's going on, and it's also evidenced on your map. (1137) is again, a lot of the activity, a lot of larceny, several burglaries and things like that. And then finally, 1127. And of course, in 1127, this is the Valley Central Way that I was talking about, where we have a lot of activity. You'll see a lot of larcenies around this area. And then the area between J and K, roughly from about 20th Street West over to just a little bit east of 50th Street West, you can see the prevalence of residential burglaries in that area. That pretty much takes care of the PowerPoint presentation of frequency. Any questions on that?
Just a comment, Jim. I think it's been interesting to see, you go up through week 22, I guess it is, and it's through May, now with the local schools, most of them being out, high school in particular, if there'll be an increase or with the number of young students out there in the community.
Yeah, we'll take a look at what we'll look at that in the forecast, because we can actually look forward a few weeks and see what or within the upcoming months, and we can see. You'll see probably the forecast is a little bit low in July, and then it'll spike up a little bit in August. And I'm suspecting when we set this model up, really about the only environmental factor that we could find that tended to drove the crime rate more than anything else that was statistically, it really wasn't statistically significant, but at least it was close, was the county fair out at the fairgrounds. Let's take a look at our 52-week chart now. Start out with homicide, and of course, homicide, as we've talked about in previous meetings, is a very low frequency occurrence in Lancaster. So this really, it shows, again, just as a quick refresher for the panel, this line that we see going up here is the linear regression line, and it's got a positive slope to it, which it's not a good thing when you have a positive slope. It's sloping up instead of sloping down. But we have so few crime or homicides here that one or two can just really throw our numbers off. So take this positive slope with a little bit of a grain of salt as we look at it, because just a couple of events can really skew your numbers. Rape we've been down in that for several weeks, at least to the end of this or data capture period. So you see a negative slope here, and that's a good thing for us. Robbery, we had 1 week where we spiked up, but essentially we're just a little bit more positive than flat on it. But that we're trending fairly flat on that. If this week had not been the spike, we would have probably been in a downward slide. We take a look at the ag assault numbers, and you can see the good news with regard to aggravated assault is you take a look. This is our baseline going back to 1997. It's a little over 16. I think it's 16.08 or something like that. And you can see every week in the last 52 weeks we've been below that baseline. That's pretty good. You can see the negative slope in the linear regression, so that's a good thing for us. Burglary, if you take a look at that, we're showing a positive slope in it, but we've only had really 1 week in about the last 10 weeks that we spiked over the baseline. Again, the baseline is in blue, and so our baseline is 24 point something. Is it 24.57 going back to 97? So we had 1 week where we went over the baseline, and everything else has been below. So we're making good progress there as well. Larcenies, you can see back at the beginning of the 52-week period, we were trending well below our averages, well below the line. We're starting to creep up just a little bit. Up to about the middle part of the year, there was only a few weeks that we actually went over the baseline. We're starting to see, starting with about the 34th week, looking backwards, you can begin to see that we're starting to spike up every once in a while a little bit more than that. And that could have something to do, I mean, my hypothesis on it is that we may be seeing some fluctuation upward again in our population that maybe we lost before, but maybe it's coming back now, and we're starting to see that in some of these numbers.
And again, Jim, how was your baseline established? Is that annually, or does that go back?
What we did was we looked back. We looked back to 1997, and then we figured we took the total for each year, and then we figured basically a weekly number that gave us the total number, and that's what our baseline is. And again, the goal is to stay below the baseline in each Part 1 category. If you stay below the baseline, then your Part 1 rate comes down. It's Grand Theft Auto, and Grand Theft Auto has perplexed all of us up to this point because of the spikes. You can see we trend along pretty well down here for a little while, and then we get a spike. And then we trend along down pretty well for a while, and then we get this spike again. And the spike is almost reliable. We know it's coming. It'd be interesting. We've talked about it internally for the better part of a year now, trying to figure out why that spike occurs. But I guess if you look back over the course of the past 52 weeks, we've really had probably 3 spikes that really threw us over the baseline. So again, that's not too bad. A lot of communities would feel pretty good if that was all they had. Then we get into arson, again, a very low frequency crime for us, and so you take a look at that, and I mean it's kind of the linear regression is positive, but it's so low that, I mean, up here the total number to drive this spike is 4. So that takes care of the 52-week chart. Any questions on that? Okay, let's move on to the maps that you were given as part of your package and take a peek at those just for a minute. The very first map that you were given is the density of crimes by reporting district, and this was always included in your map, but there was always a lot of other things on it. So I thought what we'd do is we just take and pull that out and let you look at look at the reporting districts. And what it is if you look at the legend down in the lower left, you'll see, again, this is for 5 weeks worth of data, and so we adjust our scale accordingly for that. If you take a look at it, you can see that on the low side is an area that had no Part 1 crimes, and on the upside is an area that would have 26 Part 1 crimes or more over the data capture period. And so as you take a look at that, you can see the reporting districts, most of the ones that we've pointed out already, the 1127, 1137, 1135, 1126, 1192 are all prominently displayed in there. But then we can also see those areas that we're having that are kind of in the middle, and those are areas that are in that mid-range between about 25 and 10. I also left the crime counts on there for you, so you could see the total rape, robbery, strong arm, aggravated assault, burglary for residence and other structure, larceny, grand theft vehicle, and arson. The other map is the spatial trend analysis, and this is really kind of our report card, if you will, on how we're doing. This shows where crime is going up and where we've made some progress and crime is going down. If you look at the legend on the right, you can see the colors that correspond with that. And what this does is this compares to time increments. This particular map, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll notice spatial trend analysis, Part 1 crime events, May 2010 compared to April 2010. So I took that time period that we ended up with at the last meeting, and I compared this month's data to that. And so you can see in kind of a hotspot format where we're trending upward and where we're trending downward. One of the things that we found in a larceny study we did for the first quarter is a lot of our hotspot areas are fairly consistent. They tend to be hotspots. They tend to be reliably hotspots repeatedly. So one of the things that we're working on right now is identifying some of those areas and then trying to get resources to those. Any questions on the spatial trend analysis?
Yeah, I got a couple. We talked about this earlier about 1121. Just to refresh our memory, 1121 was the worst?
1121 was one of the worst, along with 1135 and 1137, and we've made some great progress, or the Sheriff's Department and your office has made some great strides up there to help bring things down. One of the things that was really good about the most active areas, if you take a peek at it, was those most active reporting districts. The top 5 most active reporting districts, 1121 was not in that list.
Right. Lieutenant Downton, 1121 is where the majority of, you said 130 hits were down there? The parole searches were 130?
Yes.
So pretty much this is pretty significant that it's gone. What ratio are we, you said them are 6 or something?
Yeah, if we would have continued with say a list of the top 10, 1121 would have been 6.
So it went from 1 to 6? Okay. I just think that's pretty significant that we hit over 130 houses and
if you hit your most active areas, I mean we know across the country, if you hit your most active areas and you're able to bring those down, then your crime rate comes down. I mean,
right. Thank you.
The last thing we'll look at then will be the monthly forecast. This is looking back at all the way back to 2000 again in the incident database, and of course we come up here to our present time. Now, what this gives us is a total. It looks at the total Part 1 crimes. Now, I just when Captain Hoos was talking a little bit earlier about when they began to see a decline in accidents in the Antelope Valley, he said it was at the end of 2009. I just want to draw your attention to this spike right up here. This blue one that you see up here, the blue line is the actual number of events. The red line is what the forecast would have been for that particular time. The peak time for us, or the peak month for us, according to the data that's been captured, was November of 2006, and that kind of lines up with his accident peak month too, or peak time. Just kind of interesting to observe. As we come down here, we start to take a look at the month of July. The month of July, the program is forecasting 351, and it's been estimating a little bit low, but about 20 to 30 incidents low. So you're probably looking at maybe a 371 to a 381 Part 1 crimes for July. Now, in response to your observation about what would happen, it's saying for the For the month of June, about 355. And again, if we're looking at a little bit low, then we're saying probably about 375, which is probably pretty close. But that's as opposed to if we go back to 5-1, it was estimating 356. So actually what you're seeing is maybe the possibility during the first month or two of school being out, maybe the crime rate coming down just a little bit. And we've had that discussion before, and maybe it's because some of the locations that traditionally are unoccupied during the school year, there are people actually home during that time. And then, of course, this is the month of August, and it's forecasting 371. So if we compensate for the variance that or the slight variance we're seeing, we're probably looking at about 400 Part 1 crimes for August. And of course, that's also when the fair kicks in. And then we'll drop back down after that in September to about 359, which is what it's saying, so maybe about 379, right around in there.
And that's built upon historical trends, patterns, data.
Yeah, what we did was basically it's a time sequence that takes into consideration seasonal variations. That's one of the reasons why when you get out here towards 2016, you see these consistent lines across here right now, because it's taking into consideration of seasonal variations. And basically, once you hit about right here in February of 2011, it just starts kind of repeating itself until you get more data into it. Any questions?
May I add something about 1121? I think it's important to remember that right now it is a target area, and we're in there with increased enforcement, and that's why we're seeing a significant drop. We've been in there previously. That was one of our first target areas that we had in Lancaster. And we saw, when we went in there with target enforcement, we saw a significant decrease in crime, as we have this time. The problem that we ran into the first time we did it is we weren't real good with maintenance. You know, we didn't have community involvement, we didn't have a lot of neighborhood watch, on and on and on in that neighborhood, and we lost control of it once again. And we looked, and you know, we were all shocked to see that 1121 was once again on the top of the banner. So that's why we went back in with increased enforcement again. Now we're down, but this is something that the commission can do, is make sure, because we're about ready to scale down our increased enforcement there and move on to a new target area. We need to make sure, as a group, law enforcement, the commission, the city, everybody, that when we walk away from that, we've got a plan to maintain that, because the crime is down and it's a lot safer there. And you can drive through there and you don't see drug deals on the street. And we need to maintain that. So that's an obstacle, and it's something that we need to do.
I'd agree with that. Maintenance is critical to keeping the progress, so that we don't have to keep going back and taking the same piece of real estate over and over and over again, because that costs resources. It's cheaper to maintain than it is to reclaim.
Take down. Can we follow up with weed and seed in that area?
That's where it is.
The programs that we have implemented there?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that is one of the it's within the target area, weed and seed, and we've actually had some enforcement that's supplemented by weed and seed. So yes, we're on top of it.
I could tell you the other part of that is that fits directly into the community-based model. We got to get in there and get the residents, because it's a historical issue there in that RD, as Mr. Fuller and Dr. Vera and all of us that are in Dennis can tell you from growing up in the community here, that has been a historical issue for that particular RD. What we need to do now is change the way we do business in there, as far as how we maintain a presence there, and also being inclusive of the residents in that area to take ownership of their particular neighborhoods and provide advocacy services, and determine what the needs are in that specific area. So that's the direction we're going there. So we're going to enhance our personal contact with the community there to maintain that presence, as well as, so it's not just an enforcement issue. The enforcement issue is the first part of a program process here that needs to be in place to maintain ownership of that particular neighborhoods there in that RD, and that we do have a plan for that.
Do we have neighborhood impact program in that neighborhood?
No, not at this point.
Well, why couldn't we try to enlist the church to do a neighborhood impact house in that neighborhood and take over that neighborhood? Is that a possibility?
What are the parameters?
That neighborhood would be from, RD specifically is from like 15th Street West through Sierra Highway, and because it would spill over from that RD a little bit into the neighboring RD, and it's divided by 10th West, and it's north of Avenue I to Avenue H. There's a lot of, we used to have a lot of apartments there many years ago that we had lots of problems with, and I'm talking all the way back to the 80s, that were knocked down and removed. We have a lot of different type of living environment in that community. We have a lot of single-family residents that are long-term residents, and we have some multifamily within that area. So we have actually some businesses that are located within that RD. So we need to look at it more as a neighborhood by neighborhood issue. We've identified the most problematic neighborhoods, and the Sheriff's Department has addressed that in a priority level. Now what we need to do is follow that up with, and the neighborhood house is one part of that, as well as surveying, try and identify what the needs are. We have some shut-in folks there. But the reality is when you drive through that, Don and I just drove through there several months ago, and honestly, you could, even during the day, okay, some of the things that were taking place there are gone. That's not happening now. So now we need to encourage people to become involved in that neighborhood, get outdoors. You know, it's a completely different neighborhood than it was several months ago. So now we need to just maintain that. And again, that all fits within that model, right, of determining what the services that are needed there, what the needs are of the community of that particular neighborhood. And as we do with our weed and seed program, it's one neighborhood at a time. So we need to focus on that one identified neighborhood and expand from that point to cover the entire area there. But that's also there's a responsibility by the residents that live in that neighborhood to become active. It isn't just our job to provide services to them, it's for them to become involved in the community, within their neighborhoods, and be active in that manner. And we got to create that environment there.
And Commission, I agree completely with what Lee is saying. I think it's critical, really critical, that we get some of these processes in place in that community, because it's fascinating how quickly, once we have to pull back and go address other areas, how quickly an area can degenerate. And what that adds up to is your residents once again become afraid. They become hesitant to stay in contact with individuals that can help, because, you know, the criminal element is back out on the street. So I think one of the real serious factors here is, once we begin to pull back a little bit with the, you know, all of our law enforcement efforts in 1121, we've got to have systems in place so that we don't lose the confidence and the support of people up there in that community.
And if I might add, I think one of the important things, when we went into that neighborhood the first time and this last time that we're in there now, is that we chase a lot of people to other areas of the city or someplace else, or we purposely relocate them to a state address or a LA County address. And those homes are vacated. But then what will happen is after we leave, because of the management, you know, wanting to keep those places rented, then these people return. And if there's some way, and I know that we work with it with LANCAP, and I know that Lee's office is working with it too, but to really educate the homeowners that are renting their property to make sure that they're getting the proper tenant in there. And I know that financial times are tough and you want to keep that thing in the, rented in the cash flow, but that's what makes the significant difference is when those people come back in. I mean, you can drive through there now. Unfortunately, there's a lot of vacant homes, but it's because the bad clientele in that area has fled because the heat was on.
We did start a couple months ago with our redoing our landlord training program, and we've expanded that to single-family homes. The primary focus before through LandCap was to deal with multifamily homes. Now we are putting programs together for single-family home landlords, okay, and to teach the homeowners how to properly screen their tenants and what is legal for them to look into and what's not, and then how we can work together with environmental design issues and things like that to help combat crime in their neighborhoods. So we're encouraging that. It's something we're going to try and do like every 3 months or so. It's a 2-day course, and we did them the last time at night, which was really successful. We had 48 people attend, property owners that came to the training. The Sheriff's Department's an active part of that. And we do different presentations, and we actually bring in an attorney who's a civil law attorney that deals with landlord-tenant issues and those things. And we're going to be expanding that and providing those services because a large percentage of the homes in 1121 are rentals. And there is a certain amount of absentee ownership from the community that own those homes. So we want to actively get their management company folks and everything involved in this program.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Jim. Is Sergeant Kroger, is he presenting today, or?
Sergeant Kroger was unable to, due to some technical difficulties, download the information, so he won't be here today.
Thank you. Well, nice segue will be our report on Neighborhood Impact Program with Concepcion.
Good morning. In terms of neighborhood impact, I wish that we could take all of the neighborhoods and begin working on them. And we're trying to keep up with the ones that the city is giving us at the moment. But we do have, what we've done is, for those who don't know, is what we're trying to do is adopt neighborhoods where the city has identified that they are at-risk neighborhoods and begin to try to work with the kids and the residents in particular so that we can prevent them from getting into crime. And I think for right now, in particular in the Paiute area, that is very active at the moment, neighborhood impact. We've just begun in the Trent area. Mariposa is getting ready to get started. There's another one, Sunnyvale, that we've just been made aware of, and we are taking that on as well. Grace Chapel is going to be taking that area on, and then Desert View. So that's what we're trying to do right now. In the as Paiute is active in what it is that they're doing with the kids, Trent is just now coming up to speed. We have a roster of activities for the kids for the summer. We went to Endeavor School, and we are working with the principal and the teachers there, and we said, what do you think these kids need? And a lot of them just said, tutoring. Some of the kids are reading at 2nd and 3rd grade levels. So that's something that really tugs at our heart, something that we want to do something about that. And so we're working together with the school, and the kids now are coming to the house. We have between 15 and 20 kids that are coming every Thursday. And we ask them, what would you like to see us help you with? And number one was tutoring, math specifically. So we have people in Neighborhood Impact who have math degrees, and so we're going to try to help them with some of their homework over the summer. In addition to that, we will have other activities for them, basketball and foosball, Wii games, teaching them how to play the guitar and the keyboard. For the girls, it'll be the same thing, but also scrapbooking and making journals and learning how to decorate cupcakes. And so it's just activities to try to keep them occupied and off of the street. One of the pilot programs that we have in the Trend track area is the community garden, and we're really proud of that community garden. We planted it in April, and with 10 raised beds, and the garden is growing at twice and 3 times the rate of speed that was anticipated, which is a really good thing. We cannot wait to get the residents involved. We're going to be giving away the vegetables on June the 26th. And so we will, and again, the whole idea is to get the community aware. We've started the work, and what we want them to do is get involved and have them take over the beds and have the families begin to get involved, and the kids especially, because we know that when they do, then it will become a source of pride in the community. So we're very proud of that. I've got some pictures for you. Hopefully this will work. This is the, I believe those are carrots there, and I think we have some Swiss chard growing there. This is the zucchini. This is as of Saturday, I want to say. So it's gargantuan right now, and by next week we'll have to. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have tons of zucchini. Then we've got some more zucchini there. We have jalapeno and serrano peppers. We have green onions. We have herbs growing in there. I believe that it's basil and oregano, and the last one is cilantro. There's the corn. The corn is almost as tall as I am. And so here we are, some of the people that we have a little area there with plants for people to come in. We also have planted 5 fruit trees. So here's just some more pictures of the garden. And what you see there is there's a couple of 2 or 3 of the beds that we have to put bird netting over so that the birds don't get to the crops. So anyway, I think that's here we are, one of the volunteers. So there's the herb bed. So we're just excited about this whole thing, and can't wait to see what else we can do in that community.
Any questions for Concepcion? I have one. The only question I may have, maybe I missed it, are you going to have an open market to sell some of these vegetables, or?
That's for the future. I'm so glad that you asked that. The whole idea is to help to turn it over to the community and then to have a farmer's market. So we'll be working with that in conjunction with each other. So once we harvest this, the next time that we're going to plant is going to be in July, and then we'll have a fall crop, and then we'll get going on those other ideas.
Great. Thank you, and thank you for all you do. True impact with the community. With that, City Manager Mark Bozigian, Public Safety Budget Update.
Virtually everything's been said, so I'm just going to go over a couple of where we're at. First off, I really thank Commissioner Harris. This wouldn't be possible without her community garden, and that's exactly what we're looking for out of citizen volunteers, because in times when budgets are tight, what you're seeing there, the city provided the facility, but all the work, all the passion that goes into it is not city staff. It's the people that volunteer. So thank you for that and the people you work with very much. The couple things. The thing about crime, as you well know from the new commissioner, is that it's never over. It's never solved. When something gets tamped down here, something gets put up. We really, really need the commission's help with the larceny and theft. You know, Don and I were just talking about some preliminary numbers for May. Other categories look good. That category doesn't look good. Unfortunately, that is the biggest numerical category. And if we don't get larceny and theft under control and going down, our crime rate's not going to continue to go down. So we really do need the help of the commission to hold businesses accountable. There's a couple things that we talked about in the budget beyond what's been talked about here. What's been talked about here so far is the Sky Sentinel, which I've given an update. In terms of the crime analysis that the city is doing, we're doing data. We're providing the data and data analysis. We're at the stage now where we've built the system, so to speak, and we now can provide better information to the Lancaster station than virtually any other contract station in LA County gets. Now the tough part begins, as Lee was talking about, which is putting that in the field, putting that to use. It's like having a new toy or a new computer. It's no good unless you start using it and integrating it in what you do. So that's really what we're working on now, and that's the most important. And quite honestly, the third step, we're going to go to the Sheriff's Department and ask them for some things to help improve that, things that will help us immediately get the information into, because the large department, they do a lot of good things, but one of the things that they have to do now is take paper reports and put those paper reports in a system. There's other ways to do that, and we're going to try to work with the Sheriff's Department to do that. So that's our that's our goal for next year for that. What we do with Neighborhood Watch and Business Watch, Lee has talked to you, and I won't go over it, but about community policing. And that's essentially truly making the Neighborhood Watches and Business Watches part of our crime fighting initiatives. You know, instead of just going and presenting information to them and say, here's your role. You tell us what the problem is, we'll bring the Sheriff's Department and city services to bear, but your role is also to police and enforce laws in your neighborhood and be the eyes and ears, but also engage your neighbors and help us out. And that's community policing in just a nutshell. Downtown is a huge area for us, and that's reflected in the budget as well, too. We're able, with the help of the captain, Lieutenant Downton and Lee, we're able to redeploy some of our assets to specifically just work Lancaster Boulevard and the surrounding areas. And we'll be able to vary the times they do it, so it's during the busiest times, because that needs to be safe. And the Sheriff's Department gets that, the city gets that, and so that's another initiative that we have going for this upcoming budget year. I think those are the main initiatives. We did not cut the public safety budget. In fact, the public safety budget is the only budget that grew in the city. It grew by $1.2 million. We still have the largest contract of any contract city in Los Angeles County. Our budget, we gave our budget presentation to council last night. It was very well received. Our budget is in balance. It is going to be adopted on time. It does not cut service. In fact, it enhances service, more programming downtown, and it contains a 10% operating reserve and a 22% financial stability reserve. That's a 32% reserve, which is essentially equal to 4 months of operation. And that's important, because if you live on the razor's edge, you can't take chances, you can't push things, because if you miss it by 2 or 3%, you can't pay your bills. When you have a reserve, even though we haven't been able to dip into it, we can continue to provide service to the public. Anyone can provide service in good times. Providing service in bad times is important, and we're very proud that we're able to do that. The other reason a reserve is important is because in the event of a national emergency, Costco, Target, Walmart, the auto dealers, they're not going to be selling things. We're not getting sales tax. And as you've seen time and time again, the federal government's not going to step in the next day with a check. We're going to have to be self-sufficient and use that money until we can get reimbursed for some of it. So we're very proud of the budget. Public safety is a huge part of it, but it's only one part of it. We provide lots of services. And in a nutshell, that's our budget, and that's the public safety component of it. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Status of redevelopment dollars, Mark, is that still being pulled out? Or?
Yeah, good point. Because of the state's steal of our money, and it was a steal, and Mr. Vieira knows very well what that feels like, we had to write a check to the state for $17.5 million. What that essentially does is we had to borrow from our housing program, 11 of that. That means that we can't do as many programs like Neighborhood Impact. We can't do the programs that help the neighborhoods as quickly as we'd like. We have to find another way. We also had to use $6 million of our economic development funds. That means at the very time we need to incentivize and get businesses here, we don't have the cash to do it. The need doesn't go away on housing or on economic development, so what we do is we just find a different way, a different creative way, whether it's waiving fees, partnering, whatever. We have appealed that. The California Redevelopment Agency has appealed that. If the appeal is successful, we'll get that $17.5 million back. If it's not successful, we owe the state another $3.5 million next May, which we haven't budgeted, and we'll have to figure that one out too. So it hurts significantly the efforts that you folks are doing, the whole city efforts.
Hey, Mark, one of the things you're asking the commission for our assistance is in reducing larceny and theft with businesses. one of the things that was discussed or that comes to mind would be some sort of surcharge for the businesses that aren't providing the assistance to local law enforcement they might, or enforcement itself. But from the city council meeting last night, I didn't get the feeling that there was much of an appetite for raising fees, because one of the things that was brought up in your budget would be, additional revenues generated by that, which would actually bring fees up to the level of surrounding cities. And I didn't feel that there was, like I say, much of an appetite for going that route. So if we're not looking at, providing some sort of teeth to that initiative, what other ideas do you think that, what other ways could we approach it?
I agree with your assessment from last night. I do think, though, if there's businesses that are egregious and are not playing ball, so to speak, there is an appetite to charge them, just like with our residences, the nuisance property ordinance, I do think. But what I really do believe, the missing part has been, the sheriffs can go to these businesses. They see the sheriff deputies all the time because they're using that service basically as their security. The city goes, we're government, and they're going to say, yeah, of course you're here for that. I really do believe, and I hope it's not a false belief, that when community leaders, if they see 2 or 3 of you go to the business and sit down and say, you're killing us, you're hurting business in the community, you're doing this and that. I mean, we have some pretty high-powered people on this commission. If you really sit down with the manager and threaten to go to corporate, that's going to have some impact. To me, honestly, it's as simple as, look, if you're not going to do anything about it, then don't report it. You're just reporting it either for insurance purposes or to cover whatever. Okay, take care of the problem, or we're going to charge you for coming out there. And I think the council would certainly go along with that. We'd certainly recommend it. But I do think that if we just deal with a few of those businesses, we'll be able to do that. But we really need to make it a priority, and that's why I'm so happy you're going to do a subcommittee, because quite honestly, we're all very busy, and we really try to. A component of it's going to be you folks are going to push that as well, too. And I think that's going to be critically important. And it doesn't just need to be the subcommittee. If it's someone who knows Mr. Fuller, for an example, Mr. Fuller ought to be visiting him.
If I may, just another question about, I have an interest in Neighborhood Watch and how that's being coordinated through the city of Lancaster, and I don't know the answer. Who's the coordinating body for that?
That would be Mr. DeRico.
Okay.
And one of the things that Council Member Chris pointed out to me, and we've been, well, this is your first meeting, so maybe it's not remiss, but we need to get on it, is to give you both a briefing on some of the materials that Jim prepared and presented to the Commission a couple years ago, and then go through, you have access to the crime analysis data at City Hall to use that, and then to educate yourselves on Neighborhood Watch, Business Watch, sitting down with Mr. DeRico or his staff, going to meetings, et cetera. So there is an education component that this is a very complex thing, and we'd be happy to sit down with you as much time as you need. Come to your place of business to do it.
Well, yeah, personally, I would welcome that opportunity.
Okay. And so Mr. DeRico can get with you, and then Vice Chairman, if also the same offer as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Public business from the floor, non-agendized items.
We request any person who would like to address the Criminal Justice Commission on non-agendized matters to complete a speaker card. You will find speaker cards on the back table of the council chambers. Additionally, we respectfully request that you fill out the cards completely and print as clearly as possible so that if necessary, the commission or city staff will be able to contact you either by phone or mail. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. When you approach the podium, please notice there are 3 lights. The green light comes on when you begin, the yellow light will come on when you have 30 seconds remaining, and the red light will come on when your 30 minutes are up. We ask that you be considerate of the allotted time. Following this procedure will allow for a smooth and timely process for the commission meeting, and we appreciate your cooperation. State law prohibits the Criminal Justice Commission from taking action on items not on the agenda, and your item will be referred to staff. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have a speaker card. Ms. Michelle Egberts.
Good morning. Oh, you want me to start now?
Go right ahead. Yep.
Hi, I'm Michelle Egberts. I am a resident of Lancaster, and I am a non-revocable parolee. I came here before you today to request the commission to have a re-entry task force forum set up under the supervision of this committee. The non-revocable parolee program that was just introduced in January 25th of this year, I'm deviating from my presentation, is to offset through Senate Bill X-318, is to offset the $10 billion prison budget that we have right now. It costs $4,000 a year per supervised parolee in the state of California, and at this time we have 111,000 parolees statewide. We have 96,000, I believe, that are under supervision. Now let me explain something about non-revocable parolees. We are not entitled to benefits or supervision under the jurisdiction of the parole agency here in Antelope Valley or any other area. That includes giving our addresses of residence. If we change residence, we have nobody to give it to. There are some things that I'm in agreement with you. I don't believe in non-revocable parole, and I am one of them. I am stiff on crime. I made a mistake, and I paid the price for it. I am thankful to the local sheriff's department because they were there to protect me at one point in time, most recently. However, when we go back to the non-revocable parolees and what the criteria for them is to be low-risk offenders. They are being assessed in the prison system by a very intricate system. If you going all the way back to 18 years of age, this isn't just for their commitment crime. It goes back to their criminal history and convictions, not arrests, convictions. The other thing is the parolees here in Antelope Valley have very limited resources. There is Paving the Way, which is a nonprofit agency. Now, all of you know that we do not have a good state budget in place yet. We do not have any money. Those nonprofits are going to be affected. There is money out there in the federal government to do just what I am asking for this commission to do, to have a re-entry task force forum, to have the subcommittees. I'm asking to be put on next month's agenda so that I can make a proposal to this commission. I want a safe community too. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With that, comments from commissioners before closing today?
Just on that, we already have a reentry task force. That would be the Weed and Seed program. We just got a big federal grant for that. So at this point, I don't see a need for any other reentry task force at this time.
And this could be comments on anything before closing. So, yeah. Okay, well, in closing, I would just like to welcome Mr. Fuller, Mrs. Smith, and to other commissioners, and look forward to continued work with you. And we stand adjourned at 12:05. Thank you.